maybe you can relate to how I felt when I went off of hormonal birth control. I felt like I should be able to get pregnant in the first month or two. I mean, all my friends were. But then after about 3 or 4 months of my cycles becoming more and more irregular and more just weird, I started to feel like something may not be right. I also started to feel like I may not have been listening to my patients very well. Hi, I'm Ashley Korchek. I'm a board certified physician assistant, and today we're going to talk about ovulation and what happens after going off hormonal birth control and how to start figuring out if you are ovulating and if you are, when. Because if you're trying to get pregnant, that's a very important 24 hours to be aware of. So when we go off of hormonal birth control, what happens is that our hormones have actually been shut off, and we have instead replaced them with the synthetic hormones. And so when we go off of them, we either have our body just go, and like, am I supposed to do something now? And our body gets confused, or we have a rebound effect because all of a sudden our body freaks out because that synthetic hormone isn't there anymore, but we haven't been used to producing it. And so our body's like, oh, I have to produce hormone all of a sudden. And it either overshoots or produces some and not others, but they're all out of balance and it's all out of whack. If you have a condition called PCOS, which maybe you do, maybe you don't know if you do, maybe you're trying to figure that out right now. If you have a condition like PCOS, the pill can kind of uncover it, or it can exacerbate it. So I had PCOS back in high school. I wasn't diagnosed with it back then, but looking back, I had every sign and symptom, and I went to the doctor many times. It just wasn't diagnosed. But then when I went on birth control in my 20s, I always struggled with it. It was really difficult for me to find one that I agreed with, and I was actually very thankful that when we were ready to starting a family to go off of it. But then it was a nightmare. I gained a ton of weight. My periods were heavier and the worst they had ever been. They were irregular. I didn't know when they were going to come. They ranged anywhere from 18 days to, I think my longest one was somewhere like 65. And I had no idea what this meant. Now, as a physician assistant, I would tell my patients, oh, it's okay. Just give it 3 to 6 months and your hormones should balance out again. And that is true for probably the average woman. But if you have an underlying medical condition, that's definitely not true. And what we're finding more and more is that women are struggling when they come off of birth control. Now, you may have come off of birth control not because you're trying to get pregnant, and this still applies. You don't necessarily need to know when you're ovulating in order to try and get pregnant, but knowing what's going on in your cycle and that you are meeting all of the checkpoints along the way in your cycle is a very important indicator of how your hormones are doing. And that's the real key, is when you are trying to naturally heal your PCOS or your hormone imbalance of any kind, or just coming off of birth control, it's really important to be listening to those body cues, because your body is telling you what is and isn't working. It's just a matter of, do you know how to listen to it and interpret what it's telling you? So as I was starting to realize that something was not quite right, I began to research, and it was the first time, even with a medical degree, that I fully understood what was going on during my cycle and how important ovulation was and how to detect if it was in fact happening. So of course, first of all, I turned to OPKs, ovulation predictor kits, like most women who are trying to get pregnant, and I was very confused because I never seemed to get a positive. Lo and behold, it's because I wasn't ovulating. But I messed around and wasted a bunch of money with those for a few months because I felt like I shouldn't go see my doctor until I had been trying for at least 6 months to get pregnant. And actually, when I did call, they told me, well, oh, we don't see infertility till at least a year at your age. So I started to research further, and I found that although OPKs work for some women, they can be difficult or they can be fussy if you have a hormone imbalance. And so I started to take my basal body temperature, which is something I strongly encourage because it's the only way that you can really see that cyclical pattern of if in fact you are ovulating. And when are you ovulating? Because it should be about 14 days before you have a period. but it does vary a little bit from person to person. And so just marking from period to period on your fertility apps or on a piece of paper may not be the most accurate way of pinpointing when you are in fact ovulating. So this is something where it is a double-edged sword. I don't like to have the women I work with fixate on the data, but if you don't know the data of checking your cycle, of checking your hormones, of checking your weight, of checking your basal body temperature, it can be difficult to know what's happening. However, I don't want you to fixate on this number, and that's where, if you can, I encourage you to get something such as OvuSense, which is a little device that you just insert at night, and it takes care of it for you, so you don't have to wake up and have it like front of mind. What is my temperature first thing in the morning? It just records it for you on your app, and then you can go about your day. So there are some things like that to consider. There's always, finding that balance. But really pinpointing how and when are you ovulating is really the first step to, one, understanding your cycle. Detecting whether or not maybe there's something going on with your hormones that aren't quite right, because it's not normal for women to not ovulate if they are of reproductive age. And then, now we all have a weird cycle here and there, but overall we should be having regular ovulatory cycles. And then lastly, because if you're trying to get pregnant, and maybe most importantly, if you're trying to get pregnant, knowing that 24-hour window is so important. If your cycles are irregular, if you have PCOS, you may only ovulate a handful of times a year. You may not ovulate every single month. And the annoying part of it is that you actually ovulate prior to a period. So once you have a period, you've already missed your window for that month. And if your cycles are irregular, you don't know when that next one is coming unless you're tracking. And the only way to track ovulation when your cycle's all over the place and you have a hormone imbalance is by taking your temperature. So I have a lot of articles about this on my website, if you go to nourishtohealthy.com. And if you have any questions about it, because this is a kind of a hard topic to figure out when you're just trying to get the information, and you kind of wish you had the information from the last 3 months and now you don't because you're just getting started today. Feel free to put ask questions in the comments below. I'm happy to answer those. And until next time, start looking at your cycle, start tracking that data, and determining if you can tell when you've ovulated, because it is an incredibly important measure for both determining your health, your hormone balance, as well as when your fertile window is. All right, bye for now.